The first games in Kanto, Red and Green, are filled with secrets and subtle touches that many players missed on their first journeys. One fascinating detail involves the famous truck. This unused sprite sits on the edge of the harbor and serves no purpose, yet it became the center of myths that claimed it hid Mew underneath. Though completely false, the rumor sparked playground speculation for years, turning a simple background object into one of gaming's most legendary mysteries. Another overlooked detail comes from the Pewter Museum of Science. Inside, you can view displays about fossils, including a reference to space exploration that mentions a rock from the moon. This was a subtle nod to the Moonstone and to Clefairy's lunar connections, showing how even background text helped tie the world together. The cries of Pokémon in the Kanto titles also hold a hidden layer. Many of them are not unique, but instead are reused sound files, pitched up or down. For example, the cries of Rhyhorn and Charizard are identical in bass, but altered in tone, a clever trick by developers to fit more creatures into the limited cartridge memory. There is also a secret about the Safari Zone. While players knew they had a limited number of steps before being forced out, few realized that this number was exactly 500. This step counter functioned as a disguised timer, adding tension without the need for an actual clock. The way towns and routes connect in the first games reveals another hidden design element. Instead of each town being a separate map, many areas were stitched together into a single large file. That is why walking out of bounds sometimes loads unfinished areas, a technical shortcut that also created some of the game's most famous glitches. In Celadon City's department store, there is a vending machine that sells drinks. Beyond restoring health, these items unlock progression by being handed to guards, a design detail that subtly teaches players how items can have uses outside of battle. This blending of world building and gameplay was ahead of its time. Another subtle touch is that the gym leaders' rosters are not random, but carefully designed to teach mechanics. Brock uses a mix of rock and ground types to show resistances. Misty introduces water's strength against fire, and Erica teaches about status moves like Sleep Powder. Each leader is essentially a tutorial disguised as a boss battle. In terms of visuals, the Pokeballs shown in battle are not red and white spheres like we imagine today, but small black circles with a white highlight. Despite being simple dots, players instantly recognize them as symbolic Pokeballs, proof of how effective minimal design could be on limited hardware. The Elite Four chamber also hides a neat trick. Each member's room is locked behind a door that opens with a fade effect, creating the illusion of grandeur. But technically, it is the exact same map with palette swaps, meaning the League is one reused space, decorated differently for each opponent. Lastly, the title screen of Red and Blue alternates between displaying different Pokémon each time you boot up. Many fans thought it was random, but the rotation actually cycles through a set list, reflecting the internal index numbers of the creatures in the code. This made the title screen a quiet showcase of the developer's programming order, a secret only uncovered years later. The second generation, Gold, Silver, and later Crystal, introduced features that completely reshaped the series, but it also hid dozens of details that many players never noticed at the time. One of the most fascinating additions was the internal clock, which tracked not just day and night, but also the day of the week. This mechanic allowed events to be tied to real-world time, such as the bug-catching contest that only occurred on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. While the day and night cycle was obvious, the weekly rhythm was subtler, and many players only discovered it by accident when returning to areas at different times. A charming detail lies in New Bark Town, the starting point of the journey. The name itself was carefully chosen to symbolize a new beginning, contrasting with Pallet Town's theme as a blank canvas. This theme of rebirth runs throughout the region, with many towns named after trees, such as Cherry Grove, Azalea, and Ecruteak, reflecting the idea of growth and continuity. It was a quiet but deliberate way to give the second generation a strong identity tied to nature. Another hidden feature is in Goldenrod City's department store. On certain days, there is a rooftop sale where items can be bought at discounted prices. While not advertised directly, players who explored thoroughly or spoke to NPCs discovered this rotating event. It tied back to the internal clock, rewarding curiosity and patience, and made the city feel more alive. The ruins of Alph hold one of the most mysterious secrets of the generation. Here, players encounter Unknown, a Pokémon shaped like letters of the alphabet. The ruins themselves are designed like an archaeological puzzle, and solving sliding tile challenges opens hidden chambers. What many didn't realize is that the order in which unknown forms appeared was tied to the puzzles solved, connecting gameplay to linguistic themes. This gave the ruins an eerie and scholarly aura, turning them into one of the most unique areas in the series. Crystal introduced another hidden detail with the addition of animated sprites. When a Pokémon entered battle, it performed a short movement before settling into its stance. This subtle animation was groundbreaking at the time, making the creatures feel more alive. The feature wasn't emphasized in marketing, but it set a precedent for more expressive designs in future generations. Another overlooked touch was in Ecruteak City, home of the Bell Tower and Burn Tower. The two towers were designed to symbolize duality, one representing life and continuity, the other ruin and tragedy. The legendary trio of Entei, Raikou, and Suicune was said to have perished in the burning, only to be revived by Ho-Oh, weaving myth into architecture. The placement of these towers in the middle of the region acted as a thematic centerpiece for the entire story. In the Lake of Rage, the developers placed a guaranteed encounter with a shiny red Gyarados. This was the first deliberate shiny encounter in the series, designed to showcase the new mechanic of alternate colored Pokémon. By forcing players to encounter one, the games ensured that every trainer would learn about shinies without relying on random chance, an educational design decision hidden in plain sight. Breeding mechanics, another major addition, held their own secrets. For instance, if a player left two compatible Pokémon at the daycare, there were varying dialogue hints about their relationship. Phrases like, "they don't seem to like each other much," or "they're getting along very well," served as coded clues about the odds of producing an egg. This was a subtle teaching tool that revealed probabilities without breaking immersion or relying on raw numbers. A smaller but memorable detail involved the Pokégear radio function. While some stations provided music or item giveaways, others delivered cryptic commentary. For example, Buena's Password was a daily broadcast where players could earn points by remembering secret words. These quirky programs gave the region personality and created a link between the game world and the concept of real-world radio culture, which was highly popular in Japan at the time. The second generation included one of the most ambitious surprises in Pokémon history. After completing the League, players could travel back to Kanto. This was not advertised before release and stunned players who thought their adventure was over. Even more remarkable, the developers managed to fit both regions onto a single Game Boy cartridge by using clever compression and asset recycling. This hidden gift effectively doubled the game's content, making Gold and Silver feel like an endless journey. The third generation, Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald, marked the series' leap to the Game Boy Advance and brought with it a wave of new mechanics and visual upgrades. Beneath the surface, however, the games are filled with subtle details and secrets that reveal just how much care went into their design. One of the most striking features was the addition of footprints. Each species leaves behind its own distinct set of tracks when walking on sandy terrain. Though easy to overlook, this tiny detail added a sense of realism to the world, and it remains one of the most charming touches in the region. Another fascinating feature was the introduction of weather. While players quickly noticed rain, sunlight, and sandstorms in battles, the overworld also included subtle environmental changes. Routes in Hoenn were coded to have weather tied to their natural geography, with certain areas receiving downpours and others basking in sunlight. This reflected the region's theme of natural balance, and the seamless way weather shifted between areas helped Hoenn feel alive in a way no earlier region had. A small hidden detail lies in Pacifidlog Town, a settlement built on wooden rafts floating on the ocean. The dialogue of its residents hints that the town was inspired by stories of Pacific Island cultures, and it even mentions that the area floats above a legendary location tied to the Pokemon Reggie trio. This subtle blending of mythology and world building ensured that a seemingly quiet fishing town carried deeper secrets. The Trick House on Route 110 provided another memorable touch. Its puzzles were not only playful challenges, but also changed as the player progressed through their journey. By revisiting the building, players could experience new obstacles and layouts, rewarding curiosity and persistence. This kind of evolving side content was rare for the time, and it gave Hoenn a sense of continuity. Dive, a brand new mechanic, offered one of the most atmospheric details in the series. When players used the HM, the screen darkened and bubbles floated upward, creating the illusion of being submerged. What many didn't realize was that certain hidden items and legendary encounters could only be accessed by diving at specific spots. These secrets rewarded players who experimented with the mechanic, making exploration beneath the waves one of Hoenn's most magical features. Secret bases also carried their share of hidden detail. These customizable spaces could be created in caves, trees, or cliffs throughout the region. While decorating them was fun on its own, the real secret was that by linking with friends, players could battle the teams they left behind in their bases. This turned what seemed like a simple customization feature into an early form of multiplayer replayability. The battle frontier in Emerald contained many subtle mechanics of its own. The battle pike, for example, offered rooms where events were partly luck-based, sometimes giving advantages and other times triggering surprise battles. The facility blended skill and chance in a way that kept players on edge. Each building in the frontier carried its own theme, turning hidden mathematical systems into challenges that felt unique and immersive. One of the most overlooked details in Hoenn is how its geography was directly modeled after Japan's Kyushu Island. Developers flipped and scaled real maps to create the region, which is why the world includes large stretches of ocean and volcanic terrain. This real-world inspiration explains the abundance of water routes, a detail often debated by fans, but one that gave the region authenticity. Shiny hunting also gained a hidden mechanic in this generation. The odds of encountering a shiny Pokemon remained 1 in 8,192, but a feature known as the Pokemon Generator ID method made it possible to manipulate encounters. Though not intended for players to notice, this system created consistent patterns in shiny generation, allowing determined hunters to eventually track and predict shiny appearances. Hoenn included one of the most iconic hidden events, the Reggie puzzles. Unlocking the trio of ancient beings required players to decipher Braille text, use specific moves like dig, and position their Pokémon in unusual ways within ruins. These steps were unlike anything players had seen before, combining language, exploration, and teamwork. Without guides or playground rumors, many children never discovered the full process, making the Regis some of the most mysterious Pokémon to unlock in the series. The Sinnoh generation on the Nintendo DS took advantage of new hardware to create one of the most expansive regions in the series, but beyond its icy mountains and sprawling lakes lay dozens of subtle secrets. One of the most striking features was the introduction of the Distortion World in Platinum. This eerie area had players walking on walls and ceilings as gravity twisted in impossible ways. The developers used mirrored textures and inverted gravity coding to achieve the illusion. What looked like a dreamlike landscape was in fact a carefully designed manipulation of the game engine, making it one of the most surreal hidden areas in Pokémon history. Another fascinating detail involves the snow found on northern routes. Unlike earlier weather effects that simply overlaid graphics, snow in Sinnoh had depth. Pokémon and trainers left trails as they walked through it, and in deeper patches, movement slowed. These effects were subtle, but they added an immersive realism that reflected the region's harsh climate. At the heart of the region lies Mount Coronet, and it carries its own secrets. The developers coded the entire mountain as a single continuous map split into layers. This design choice gave players the sense of traversing a massive landmark that connected the region together. In mythology, the mountain was also tied to the Creation Trio, showing how gameplay design and lore were woven into a single location. Hidden within the Battle Tower, and later the Battle Frontier, were NPC teams that referenced developers. Trainers used lineups based on Game Freak's staff preferences, a playful Easter egg tucked away for only the most dedicated players to discover. This tradition of including staff-inspired trainers has quietly continued in many generations since. Another small touch lies in the underground. This side feature let players dig for spheres and fossils, but it also included a secret multiplayer element. By using local wireless, players could enter each other's tunnels, steal flags, and decorate their bases. For many, this was their first taste of Pokémon blending exploration, collection, and social interaction in such a creative way. Shiny hunting also gained a hidden boost in this generation. The Pokéradar, an item that allowed chaining of wild encounters, dramatically increased the odds of encountering shiny Pokémon when used skillfully. While the base chance remained 1 in 8,192, chaining could reduce it to as low as 1 in 200. This transformed shiny hunting from sheer luck into a skill-based challenge, a hidden mechanic that rewarded patience and precision. Another overlooked detail is the journal mechanic introduced in Diamond and Pearl. Each time the player saved and returned to the game, the journal showed the last few events completed. This was a subtle quality of life feature meant to help children remember what they were doing. It made long-term play less confusing, but many players hardly noticed it consciously. The Pokémon contests in Sinnoh also hid deeper systems. While the surface appeared to be about accessories and appeals, the underlying mechanics used an invisible hearts counter to determine crowd excitement. By choosing moves that fit specific categories and coordinating with accessories, players could manipulate this hidden system to win. What looked like a simple rhythm minigame was actually a layered competition requiring strategy. In Snow Point Temple, the developers placed statues of Regice, Regirock, and Registeel. These statues hinted at how to unlock Regigigas, the hidden legendary found asleep at the bottom of the temple. However, the twist was that the Regi trio had to be transferred from earlier games in order to awaken it. This clever connection encouraged continuity between generations, something the developers considered essential for a long-lasting series. Sinnoh included one of the most ambitious Pokédex projects. For the first time, every Pokémon was coded with distinct male and female differences when appropriate. Some were subtle, like different horn sizes, while others were more obvious, like tail shapes or patterns. These small details had no direct effect on gameplay, but added a hidden layer of biological realism. The dedication to such subtle cosmetic variation showed how much the franchise had grown in scope. The Unova games, arriving on the Nintendo DS, brought a bold shift in style and storytelling. With a region inspired by New York City rather than Japan, the developers wove dozens of hidden details into the world to emphasize themes of modernity, diversity, and conflict. One of the most striking details was the Castelia City skyline. By rotating the camera in certain spots, players could see moving boats in the harbor and planes flying in the distance. These background animations had no gameplay function but added a layer of immersion, making the region feel alive in a way no Pokémon City had before. Another detail lies in the Village Bridge area. While crossing it, players may notice that background music changes based on NPCs standing nearby. A man playing guitar, a woman humming, and even footsteps contribute to the soundtrack as you approach them, layering new melodies into the tune. This was one of the first times the franchise used interactive audio to blend character presence with environmental music. Unova's story also carried hidden nods to earlier regions. For example, Team Plasma's castle rises dramatically around the Pokémon League during the climax of Black and White. In the game's data, the castle is mapped directly on top of the League, confirming that it wasn't simply an animation, but a structural takeover. This revealed the level of detail developers put into making the world feel consistent. One curious touch lies in the Ferris wheel of Nimbasa City. While most players enjoy a simple ride, the passenger varies depending on the day of the week. On certain days, you can ride with unique NPCs, including Team Plasma members who break character and casually chat with you. This playful, hidden feature gave depth to what seemed like a simple amusement ride. In terms of Pokémon design, the sprites in Black and White were animated for the first time in every battle. However, the hidden detail is that these animations were coded to loop continuously, meaning each Pokémon displayed movement throughout combat. While it may seem small now, at the time this feature made battles feel more dynamic than ever before, and it pushed the DS hardware to its limits. Another overlooked feature involves seasons. For the first time, the overworld changed based on the month, with routes shifting colors, snow piling up in winter, and leaves falling in autumn. Some areas even became accessible or blocked off, depending on the season, such as icy patches melting in spring. The rotation of seasons tied directly into Unova's identity as a living, changing region. Black 2 and White 2 introduced the Pokémon World Tournament, one of the most beloved features in the series. Hidden within this facility was the ability to battle nearly every gym leader and champion from earlier games. This was not just fan service. The teams used by these trainers were carefully balanced with movesets that reflected their original games. It was a celebration of the franchise's legacy tucked into a side facility. Another small but striking touch lies in the Intralink feature. By connecting to another player's game, you could walk through a mystical forest and warp into their Unova. While it seemed like a simple multiplayer gimmick, the forest contained hidden NPCs that only appeared under certain conditions, offering small rewards. This made Intralink a place of secrets for those who explored thoroughly. The subway battle facility also carried its own hidden detail. Much like the battle tower of earlier generations, it offered streak-based challenges. But the twist was that the announcer would change dialogue based on your progress, adding layers of commentary and even referencing famous phrases from earlier games. It was another way of rewarding persistence with small but memorable surprises. Lastly, one of the most ambitious details of Unova lies in its Pokédex. For the first time, a regional dex included over 150 entirely new species without relying on older ones. This bold design choice emphasized the idea of starting fresh, mirroring the experience of new players. Hidden in that decision was a statement. Unova was meant to feel like the beginning of a brand new world, even for veteran fans. While the sweeping visuals were obvious, dozens of hidden details were tucked into the games that players often overlooked. One of the most striking is in Lumio City, which features the largest city hub ever created in a mainline Pokemon game at that time. Beneath the rotating camera angles and bustling avenues lies a detail many miss: the Prism Tower. Kalos's version of the Eiffel Tower glows differently depending on the time of day, creating an unspoken rhythm of light that mirrors the feel of Paris at night. Another fascinating touch lies in the cafes scattered throughout Lumios. On the surface, they appear to be simple shops, but their menus often contain references to French culture and cuisine, subtly grounding the region in its European inspiration. More intriguingly, NPC dialogue inside these cafes occasionally drops cryptic hints about legendary Pokemon or secret items, rewarding attentive players who linger in places most would overlook. The character customization system, a first for the franchise, hides its own secret. While it may seem that clothes are simply cosmetic, the color of a player's outfit also influences their trainer card background and even NPC comments. This layer of feedback made the customization feel more personal, as though the world itself was responding to your style choices. Hidden deep in the Kalos region is the Chamber of Emptiness, an area with little explanation. The room is nearly empty except for a single item, depending on the version of the game. Its eerie silence and lack of context led to speculation that it was tied to a scrapped event or legendary encounter. The absence of clear purpose has made it one of the most mysterious locations in the series, a place that feels deliberately unfinished. The Kalos Pokédex also carries an unusual quirk. Instead of a single list, it is divided into 3 regional subsections: Central, Coastal, and Mountain. This was a hidden nod to France's own geographical divisions, reflecting the country's varied landscapes. Beyond the thematic symbolism, the split made capturing and tracking Pokemon easier, though many players may not have realized the cultural reasoning behind it. Another small detail lies in the Hotel Richissime. If players take on jobs there, the tasks include wiping windows and serving customers, but the hidden reward is not just money. The NPCs you help will later appear in different parts of the city, acknowledging your service. This gave a sense of continuity to seemingly trivial side quests, tying small acts of kindness into the broader world. In terms of competitive play, Mega Evolution was the most revolutionary addition. While everyone noticed the transformations, few realized that each mega design carried symbolic traits. For example, certain dragons gained sharper, more angular features to emphasize power, while others took on extravagant flourishes meant to reflect elegance. The hidden detail was that mega forms often exaggerated the original design philosophy of the Pokemon, making them visual statements of what defined each species. The background NPCs in Lumiose also hide surprising details. Some are animated to use smartphones, take photographs, or even interact with one another in small groups. Subtle touches meant to reflect the urban bustle of Paris. This was the first time the series depicted people as part of modern city life, rather than static figures standing still, showing how the developers wanted to immerse players in a living environment. Another overlooked feature lies in the Battle Maison, Kalos's equivalent of the Battle Tower. While the rules and streak-based challenges were familiar, the Maison quietly included a set of trainers who referenced past champions through their dialogue. These nods rewarded longtime fans who had followed the series through earlier regions, turning a battle facility into a nostalgic treasure hunt. Lastly, one of the most curious secrets is tied to a single NPC known as the Hex Maniac. In Lumio City, if players visit the second floor of a certain building, the lights dim and a ghostly girl appears behind the player, saying, "No, you're not the one," before vanishing. This unexplained encounter has no follow-up in the game, and the girl is never seen again. The detail became one of the most enduring mysteries of the generation, sparking theories about cut content, alternate storylines, and haunted connections within Kalos. The Alola generation brought a tropical flair to the series, and with it came an enormous number of subtle design choices and secrets that often slipped past casual players. One of the most striking details is how the Pokédex itself is alive inhabited by Rotom, a mischievous, ghostly Pokémon that speaks to the player. While most fans noticed Rotom's chatter, fewer realized that its expressions and comments change based on how often you interact with it. Over time, it develops a stronger bond with the trainer, quietly reflecting the series' recurring theme of companionship. Another fascinating touch lies in the way Alola reimagined gyms. Instead of the traditional format, players face island trials, each with a different style of challenge. What makes these trials unique is that the designs often reflect aspects of Hawaiian culture. For example, the dances in Kiawe's trial mirror hula traditions, while cooking challenges echo communal feasts. These cultural nods were not spelled out directly, but they rooted the region in a sense of authenticity. The totem Pokemon battles also carried hidden mechanics. Each totem had boosted stats compared to its normal species, and they could summon allies for help. What many players didn't know is that the choice of allies varied by trial, sometimes including unusual partners not normally found in the area. This made each encounter unpredictable, emphasizing the idea that the environment itself supported the guardian Pokemon. One of the most charming secrets is tied to the Poképelago, a feature where Pokemon left in storage could explore islands and gather resources. While many treated it as a background activity, Pelago actually contained rare item opportunities, such as evolutionary stones and even shiny hunting bonuses if you left enough creatures exploring. This gave new purpose to the storage box, turning what was once just a menu into an active part of the world. The Alola region also included one of the series' most famous Easter eggs. In a hotel in Hau'oli City, you can find a mysterious character known as Looker, an investigator who has appeared in multiple generations. His presence hints at an interconnected world beyond the islands, showing how characters travel between regions in ways players rarely witness directly. Another detail lies in the weather. While Hoenn introduced weather mechanics years earlier, Alola refined the system with environmental variations tied to the island. Certain routes would always show specific weather like rainstorms, while others had unique skyboxes that reflected the tropical atmosphere. On rare occasions, rainbow effects appeared in the background after showers, a touch that many players missed unless they paused to look around. In Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, the Ultra Wormholes provided one of the most unusual hidden features in the franchise. By flying through wormholes with Solgaleo or Lunala, players could encounter legendary Pokémon from past regions. The odds of finding shinies also increased dramatically, depending on how far into the wormhole you traveled, making this one of the most efficient shiny hunting methods ever included in a mainline game. The mechanic combined exploration, chance, and reward in a way that was both thrilling and deeply mysterious. Even the PC system in Alola held secrets. When browsing your stored Pokémon, you might notice tiny animations, such as Pokémon blinking or shifting slightly, making them feel more alive than in previous generations. It was a small touch that matched the overall theme of vitality in the region, where everything seemed to pulse with energy. The Alola games also wove in references to folklore. The guardian deities, such as Tapu Fini and Tapu Koko, were based on Hawaiian mythology about protective spirits tied to land and sea. Their shrines, scattered across the islands, were designed with careful architectural nods to real-world sacred sites. Though presented as fantasy, these details gave the legends a grounding in cultural history. One of the most playful details came in the form of NPC trainers. In certain battles, opponents use Z moves with exaggerated poses. What many don't know is that if you watch closely, the animations sometimes differ slightly based on gender or age, with children striking sillier poses and elders moving more stiffly. These quirks added humor and personality, rewarding players who paid attention to subtleties even in the heat of battle. The Galar region, set in Pokémon Sword and Shield, was the franchise's first leap to the Nintendo Switch, and with that leap came both ambitious changes and subtle hidden details. One of the most striking features lies in the wild area, an open zone filled with roaming Pokémon. What many players didn't notice is that encounter tables change not only with weather, but also with specific times of the day. A drizzle might bring out water types, while sandstorms attract ground dwellers. These shifts happen even in corners of the same area, creating a constantly changing ecosystem that rewards players who revisit zones at different times. Another detail is tied to the NPCs you meet at train stations. While most stand as background figures, some subtly change dialogue after certain milestones. A businessman, for example, might acknowledge the rise of Dynamax battles, while a child comments on how the world feels safer after the champion is defeated. These touches add quiet continuity, showing that the world evolves alongside your journey. The Dynamax and Gigantamax system itself carries hidden design philosophy. Each Gigantamax form exaggerates key traits of a species, much like Mega Evolution before it. For instance, one Firestarter becomes a towering athlete-like figure, emphasizing its soccer-inspired design. Another Pokémon, already round in its base form, becomes massive and planet-like, reflecting its role as a cosmic joke. These designs aren't random but deliberate magnifications of personality traits, giving every Gigantamax a narrative layer beneath its visual spectacle. In terms of exploration, the small town of Balanlia hides a unique touch. The entire village glows with bioluminescent fungi, and if you look closely, some mushrooms dim or brighten when approached. This interactive lighting effect has no bearing on gameplay, but creates a dreamlike atmosphere, showing how far the developers pushed ambiance on the new hardware. The game's music system also carried hidden detail. In certain towns, the background track adds extra instruments once you've progressed past specific story points. Wyndon's bustling theme, for example, becomes richer after you've entered the Champion Cup. The layering of music subtly reinforces the feeling of escalation without players even realizing why the soundscape feels more grand. Another small but charming touch lies in the league cards. Beyond being collectible, the cards carry hidden nods to a trainer's personality. Gym leaders often have fun or unusual expressions in their rare versions, and some even reference quirks that never appear in dialogue. For example, one leader is shown munching curry in a photo, a nod to their off-duty habits. These details quietly humanize characters, making them more memorable than just battle opponents. The curry-making feature in camps hides a surprising level of detail. Not only does the type of curry vary based on ingredients, but Pokémon react differently depending on flavor. Sweet curries might delight certain species, while bitter versions prompt amusing reactions. Some animations even include unique facial expressions that occur nowhere else in the game, rewarding those who experiment with cooking. Another overlooked feature involves the Rotomi machine in Pokémon centers. Most players use it for simple functions, but tucked inside are job postings called Poké-jobs. While these seem like a way to pass time, they reference real industries such as construction, delivery, and agriculture. These tasks quietly expand the world, showing how Pokémon support everyday life beyond battles. A curious Easter egg exists in Sirchester's hotel. On the second floor, you can find rooms with odd NPCs who reference mysteries, including one who claims to be from another world. Dialogue like this fueled speculation about connections to Ultra Space or other regions, and though it was never confirmed, it remains one of Galar's most mysterious side details. Lastly, Sword and Shield hide a playful nod in their references to the United Kingdom. Many NPCs use British slang in localized versions, such as mate, cheeky, or proper. This regional flavor extended even to move names, like Tea Time, which forces all Pokémon in battle to use the held item berries they carry. It was both a humorous mechanic and a cultural wink, grounding Galar in its British identity. Paldea, introduced in Pokémon Scarlet and Violet, marked the franchise's first truly open-world region, and with that shift came dozens of hidden details tucked into its design. One of the most striking lies in the way wild Pokémon behave. Unlike earlier games, where they wandered aimlessly, creatures in Paldea display unique habits. Birds circle the skies in flocks, small rodents huddle in groups, and aquatic species actually swim in rivers and lakes. These behaviors vary depending on time of day and even weather, making the region feel more alive than any before it. Another fascinating detail comes from the ruins scattered across the map. Many players initially dismiss them as simple background decoration, but if explored carefully, they reveal broken statues and cracked walls that subtly reference the ancient lore of the Treasures of Ruin Quartet. By connecting the environmental storytelling with these legendary beings, the game encourages players to piece together myths from scattered hints. The school setting in Paldea also hides secrets. While classes may seem optional, completing them unlocks additional lessons and exam questions, many of which include trivia that directly explains hidden mechanics of the game. These tidbits cover breeding, shiny odds, and move interactions, essentially teaching players systems that have long been hidden behind the scenes. The Academy, therefore, doubles as both narrative flavor and a tool for revealing mysteries. Another overlooked detail lies in Terra raid battles. Each time a Pokemon terastallizes, its crystalline form takes on a unique visual pattern depending on its Terra type. Fire shines like blazing flames, while Ghost glimmers with eerie purple wisps. These forms are more than cosmetic. They provide subtle hints in multiplayer raids, giving observant trainers a visual advantage before text even appears. A small but charming secret exists in Mesagoza, the central city. Street performers scattered throughout the plazas include jugglers, musicians, and dancers, and their routines change as the story progresses. One musician begins with simple melodies, but later adds more complex tunes, symbolizing the growth of the player's adventure alongside the city's atmosphere. In Area Zero, one of the game's most mysterious locations, hidden details are everywhere. The crystals embedded in the cavern walls pulse with faint light, and when viewed from certain angles, their glow matches the colors of the scarlet and violet book covers. This subtle link reinforces the theme of Paradox Pokemon and connects visual design to lore without ever being explained outright. Picnics also carry hidden depth. Beyond healing and creating sandwiches, players can sometimes trigger rare Pokemon egg events. What many overlooked is that the type of sandwich made increases the odds of hatching shiny Pokemon of certain types, turning a seemingly light-hearted cooking feature into a tool for advanced shiny hunters. Paldea's world is also filled with cultural references. Town names are derived from Spanish words related to spices, herbs, and cooking, tying into the food theme of the region. For example, Mesagoza comes from mesa, meaning table, while Leventia draws from levantar, to lift or rise. These linguistic details quietly enrich the region's identity, grounding it in its Iberian inspiration. Another small but clever feature is tied to the game's weather system. Unlike earlier regions, Paldea uses real lighting shifts to reflect the passing day. Sunsets cast long shadows, and at night, the sky reveals constellations based on real-world star patterns. Players who stop to look upward may recognize formations mirrored from Earth's skies, an immersive detail rarely acknowledged. Lastly, one of the most curious details comes from NPC behavior during battles. Trainers no longer simply stand still. They cheer, wince, or throw encouraging gestures as their Pokemon fight. While subtle, these animations create the sense of a living world where battles are spectacles rather than isolated encounters. It shows the developer's intent to make Paldea not just vast, but alive with emotional cues. The Pokemon franchise has always been best known for its mainline adventures, but its spin-offs have quietly carried their own troves of hidden details and secrets. One of the most beloved is Pokemon Snap on the Nintendo 64. On the surface, it's a photography game, but beneath its relaxing pace lies a layer of environmental puzzles. Throwing apples or pester balls at the right moment causes creatures to reveal hidden behaviors. Knocking a Magikarp into a waterfall, for example, leads to its transformation into Gyarados, turning a simple photo op into a mythical moment. This blending of puzzle solving with photography gave Snap its lasting charm. Another spin-off with fascinating secrets is Pokemon Stadium. Beyond its flashy 3D battles, Stadium included a feature that read data from Game Boy cartridges using the transfer pack. This allowed players to see their teams in full 3D, but the hidden detail was that Pokemon retained custom nicknames and movesets, creating a personalized experience. It was one of the first times players could see their own creatures come alive outside the small Game Boy screen, a subtle innovation that set the stage for the series' future connectivity. Pokemon Mystery Dungeon introduced hidden emotional depth. Unlike the main games, where trainers take the spotlight, Mystery Dungeon places players in the role of the Pokemon themselves. The storylines often feature existential themes like identity, mortality, and destiny, and the hidden detail is how these heavy topics are softened by the art style and dialogue. For many children, it was their first experience with storytelling that felt profound within a Pokemon game. Another spin-off, Pokemon Ranger, hides its own curiosities. The capture styler used to be drawn in circles on the DS touchscreen, and while most players focused on completing loops quickly, the device itself had durability points coded into it. If used recklessly, it could break mid-capture, forcing players to take more care. It was a hidden mechanic that symbolized the fragility of bonds being formed, teaching players patience as much as skill. Pokemon Colosseum on the GameCube also carried its share of hidden detail. Unlike the cheerful tone of mainline games, Colosseum presented a darker story set in the desert region of Ore. The hidden twist lay in its focus on shadow Pokemon, corrupted creatures that had their hearts closed off. Purifying them required not just battling, but spending time walking with them, giving them colognes, and even entering them into battles of friendship. This layered mechanic showed how healing came through kindness, a quiet but powerful theme. In Pokemon XD, Gale of Darkness, the sequel to Colosseum, one particularly interesting secret was the introduction of Shadow Lugia. While many thought it would become a permanent alternate form, it existed only in that game, never appearing again in the franchise. This exclusivity gave the spin-off a sense of mystery, a hidden one-of-a-kind creation that remains a fan favorite to this day. Pokemon Conquest blended strategy gameplay with the Pokemon world, a surprising crossover with the Nobunaga's Ambition series. Hidden inside its mechanics was a system where warriors and Pokemon had compatible bonds, and the strength of that bond affected both stats and evolutions. Though rarely explained outright, this hidden connection turned Conquest into more than just a tactical RPG. It became an exploration of how relationships shaped growth. Pokemon Go, though massively popular, also contains hidden intricacies. The game ties certain spawns to real-world locations, with water types appearing near rivers, fire types near industrial zones, and grass dwellers in parks. These design choices mirrored the philosophy of the original creator, Satoshi Tajiri, who wanted players to feel the thrill of collecting creatures in their own environments. It was an invisible link between the real world and the world of Pokemon, hidden beneath the augmented reality layer. Another curious spin-off is Pokemon Cafe Remix, a puzzle game where creatures help run a cafe. Though lighthearted, the hidden detail is that each species' abilities tie to its personality. For example, a fire type might heat up puzzles faster, while a psychic type manipulates pieces with precision. These subtle nods to typing and character traits ensured the mechanics felt rooted in the lore, even in a casual title. Lastly, Detective Pikachu introduced narrative depth, rarely seen in the franchise. While most players focused on the novelty of hearing a Pikachu talk with a gruff voice, the hidden detail lies in its investigation system. Every clue gathered is tied to environmental storytelling, from subtle footprints to overheard conversations. It wasn't just a mystery game with Pokemon, it was an experiment in expanding how much personality the world could hold. The Pokemon remakes have always been more than just retellings of older stories. Beneath the modernized graphics and updated features lie subtle touches that reward both nostalgia and exploration. In Fire Red and Leaf Green, for example, one of the quietest details is that the updated Pokédex entries often reflect new discoveries made after the original Red and Blue. Some creatures gained mentions of abilities or habitats that didn't exist in the first generation, subtly showing how the Pokemon world itself had grown. It was a hidden narrative way of linking past and present. Another overlooked feature in these remakes is the Sevii Islands. On the surface, they were bonus locations, but they actually provided continuity between Kanto and Johto. Several NPCs mention events tied to gold and silver, hinting at the interconnected timeline of the regions. This bridging of generations was a subtle treat for players who had grown up with both. Heart Gold and Soul Silver also carried their share of secrets. One of the most beloved is the return of the ability to have a Pokemon follow you. While Pikachu did this in Yellow, the remake expanded it to every species. What's often overlooked is that each creature had unique animations and reactions depending on where you walked. Some shivered in the cold, others perked up near water. These details deepened the bond between trainer and partner, quietly embodying the theme of companionship. Another fascinating hidden feature in Heart Gold and Soul Silver lies in the Safari Zone. Unlike earlier versions, this one allowed players to customize areas by placing objects. Over time, the types of Pokemon that appeared would change depending on how long objects were left in place. This mechanic wasn't explained directly, meaning many players only discovered its depth by experimenting. It was one of the most ambitious Safari Zone designs, hidden beneath a casual explanation. The remakes also paid careful attention to music. In Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, players could unlock a special track by visiting the Game Freak Director NPC after completing certain milestones. The tune was a remixed version of older battle themes, a hidden nod to the franchise's history and the developers' pride in their work. These kinds of Easter eggs gave longtime fans a sense of being in on an inside joke. Another overlooked touch in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire was the soaring mechanic. Once you obtained the Eon Flute, you could ride Latios or Latias across the skies. While many saw this as just a flashy form of fast travel, the hidden detail is that you could spot mirage spots, mysterious islands that held rare items and legendaries. These were generated daily, making the skies a living, changing map. It turned exploration into a secret-laden ritual. In Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, one of the most charming hidden additions was the return of the Underground, now called the Grand Underground. This feature expanded on the digging minigame, but also allowed players to encounter rare Pokemon with unique spawn conditions. What many didn't realize was that the odds of certain Pokemon appearing increased the more statues of their typing you placed in your secret base. It was a hidden mechanic that rewarded collectors and decorators at once. The remakes also quietly included references to their original versions. For example, in Fire Red and Leaf Green, one NPC jokes about how technology is amazing, the same line spoken in the original Red and Blue. These repeated lines acted as a subtle handshake between the past and the present, grounding players in nostalgia while reminding them how far the series had come. Another subtle feature in Heart Gold and Soul Silver was the Pokewalker accessory, a pedometer that connected to the game cartridge. Beyond hatching eggs or gaining steps, It hid rare event Pokemon like Surfing Pikachu, which could only be obtained through the device. This turned real-world activity into hidden treasure, encouraging players to bring the franchise into their daily lives. In Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, the Delta episode added new lore about the origins of Mega Evolution and the meteor that threatened Hoenn. One overlooked detail is that the storyline included references to parallel universes, suggesting that the remakes existed in an alternate timeline to the originals. This subtle narrative twist transformed what seemed like a retelling into something entirely new, a hidden way of expanding the lore of the Pokémon multiverse. The Pokémon series has always been about catching and battling, but its side features often contain some of the most overlooked details in the franchise. One of the earliest examples comes from the contests introduced in Hoenn. While many players focused on accessories and moves that impressed judges, the hidden mechanic lay in audience excitement. Each appeal raised or lowered invisible crowd points, which determined how judges reacted and whether a performance succeeded. These subtle layers turned contests into much more than dress-up, rewarding those who understood the hidden math behind the cheers. Another beloved side feature is the Pokeathlon from Heart Gold and Soul Silver. At first glance, it appeared to be a simple set of athletic minigames, but beneath the surface, stats shifted depending on weather conditions. For example, certain Pokemon gained higher speed on sunny days or greater stamina when it rained. This attention to environmental detail gave the events extra depth and tied them back to the main series themes of adaptation. The Battle Frontier, first introduced in Emerald, contains countless secrets. Each facility ran on unique hidden mechanics. The Battle Pike, for instance, offered rooms where outcomes depended on chance, including status effects or ambushes. What many didn't know is that the odds were carefully balanced to ensure streaks never felt purely lucky or unfair. The math behind each choice was hidden from players, but it shaped their experience in subtle ways. Another curious addition lies in the PokeStar studios of Black 2 and White 2. These side activities had players acting in short films with their Pokemon, but hidden within the scripts were references to classic Japanese cinema and tokusatsu superhero shows. This layer of parody rewarded those familiar with pop culture, turning what seemed like a quirky distraction into a cultural homage. Pokemon Amy, introduced in X and Y, added intimacy to the series. The hidden detail here was that affection gained through feeding and petting translated directly into battle advantages. Pokemon with higher affection could land critical hits more often, survive fainting blows, or shake off status conditions. While many players thought of Amy as purely cosmetic, it secretly bridged roleplay and strategy, rewarding kindness with tangible power. Another overlooked side mechanic is the slot machine minigame that once existed in earlier titles. While it looked like a simple chance-based game, the machines were programmed to subtly adjust odds in the player's favor after extended play. Developers didn't want children to feel punished by constant losses, so they built in hidden safety nets. Over time, however, the gambling imagery led to these minigames being removed in later generations, making them a curious relic of Pokemon history. The contests returned in Sinnoh with super contests, and these also hid unexpected depth. Pokemon accessories added points, but their placement mattered more than many realized. Accessories closer to the center of the sprite were weighted differently in scoring than those near the edges. This invisible scoring system explained why some players consistently performed better even when their decorations seemed similar. Pokemon Camp in Sword and Shield also carried its own charm. While cooking curry was the main attraction, what many didn't know is that the type of toy you used to play with Pokemon influenced their bond. Some toys appealed to energetic species, while others calmed more timid ones. The reactions varied so subtly that most players never noticed, but these hidden preferences added extra life to interactions. Another curious side feature is the bug catching contest from Gold and Silver. While it seemed like a simple timed event, winners were chosen using hidden formulas that factored in a creature's level, species rarity, and remaining health points. This meant that a lower level Pokemon of a rare species could outscore a stronger but common one, a detail that explained many children's surprising results. The Pokewalker deserves mention again for its hidden layers. Beyond counting steps, certain areas unlocked only after specific milestones, and the odds of finding rare Pokemon or items shifted depending on how many steps you logged in a single day. This turned walking into a kind of hidden grind, rewarding consistency over bursts of effort. It was one of the earliest times the franchise encouraged healthy, real-world habits through hidden mechanics. The encounters with legendary and mythical Pokemon have always stood as the highlights of each generation, but behind these battles are hidden details that often go unnoticed. In the Kanto titles, one of the earliest examples comes from the encounter with the legendary birds. Articuno, Zapdos, and Moltres each rest in isolated locations that mirror their elements: icy caverns, power plants, and volcanic islands. What many players never realized is that these environments weren't chosen randomly. Their placements were meant to represent extremes of nature across the region, creating a subtle theme of balance between opposing forces. In the Johto generation, the introduction of roaming legendaries brought new layers of hidden mechanics. Entei, Raikou, and Suicune fled after every battle unless caught immediately. Behind the scenes, their positions were recalculated every time the player changed routes. This gave the impression that they were truly roaming, unpredictable, and wild. What players rarely knew is that the game stored their last location in memory, making them feel like living beings moving across the region in real time. Another detail lies in Hoenn's Regi trio. To unlock Regice, Regirock, and Registeel, players had to solve puzzles that included Braille inscriptions. This wasn't just a quirky design choice. The use of Braille was intended as an educational tool, teaching children about accessibility. Including an entire alphabet inside the game was a hidden nod to inclusivity, something unusual in games at the time. In Sinnoh, the encounter with Giratina introduced one of the most unusual hidden details in franchise history. When fought in the Distortion world, the battlefield background warps and bends, unlike any other encounter. This wasn't just for atmosphere, it was coded separately from every other battle background, meaning Giratina's encounter had its own unique rules. This made the battle feel otherworldly, reflecting its place as a guardian of antimatter. Another curious touch appears in Unova's Reshiram and Zekrom encounters. In Black, Reshiram is fought first, while in White, Zekrom takes the lead. However, the hidden twist is that the game actually contains both encounters coded together. The unused dragon simply shifts to a static sprite in the background, silently acknowledging its existence. This created the illusion that both dragons were present during the climax, strengthening the duality theme without needing two cartridges at once. In Kalos, the encounter with Xerneas and Yveltal also carries symbolic detail. Xerneas's pose, with antlers spread in an X shape, mirrors the title of its game, while Yveltal's wings stretch to form a Y. These design choices weren't just stylistic, They served as visual reinforcement of the version exclusivity. Even Zygarde, though encountered later, is built on the shape of a Z, completing the trilogy in a way hidden within the very poses of the legendaries themselves. In Alola, Solgaleo and Lunala's encounters took place in dramatic portals tied to ultra space. What few realized is that the background in these battles was unlike normal skies. Instead, it contained shifting, nebulous patterns that mirrored real astronomical photography. Developers pulled from telescope images of galaxies and nebulas to build a cosmic feel, grounding fantasy in real science. Galar's legendary wolves, Zacian and Zamazenta, also include hidden details. Their battle animations subtly shift depending on whether or not they hold their signature items. Without their weapons, their movements are defensive and restrained, but with the rusted sword or shield, their animations grow bolder and more aggressive. This change in demeanor isn't explained outright, but it reflects their legends as protectors who only reach full strength when armed. In Paldea, the treasures of Ruin Quartet Wo-Chien, Chien-Pao, Ting-Lu, and Chi-Yu were tied to sealed shrines across the region. To awaken them, players had to find and pull stakes scattered in the overworld. What many didn't realize is that the color of each stake matched the glow of its shrine, a visual breadcrumb trail meant to guide observant players. This clever design linked exploration, puzzle solving, and narrative in a seamless way. Lastly, mythical Pokémon often carried hidden details in their event distributions. In earlier generations, creatures like Mew or Celebi were only obtainable at rare, in-person events. But what few players knew is that unused event data often remained inside the cartridges. This meant mythical Pokémon were technically there in every copy of the game, locked away unless triggered. The presence of these hidden files fueled years of playground rumors and glitch hunts, keeping the myths alive even when the official events had passed. Throughout the Pokémon series, the non-playable characters, shopkeepers, rivals, wandering hikers, and even nameless bystanders carried dozens of hidden details that quietly expand the world. One of the most famous examples comes from Kanto, where a single NPC in Pewter City tells you that Pokémon can be cut down with the move Cut. While this seems like a throwaway tutorial, the hidden twist is that the NPC's dialogue changes after you beat Brock, acknowledging your victory. It was one of the first times dialogue updated dynamically to reflect the player's progress. In Johto, a hidden detail lies in Goldenrod City's underground. The shopkeepers switch places depending on the day of the week, meaning the shops you see aren't static. This subtle design choice gave the impression of a real marketplace with rotating vendors, grounding the city in a sense of routine and community. Hoenn also includes NPC secrets. In Slateport's Oceanic Museum, many characters are simple visitors, but one mentions that Captain Stern is funding research into deep-sea exploration. This small line foreshadows the submarine theft later in the story, hidden in plain sight as ordinary dialogue. It showed how the writers wove narrative hints into seemingly mundane characters. In Sinnoh, Jubilife City contains one of the strangest NPC encounters. A clown who quizzes the player about game mechanics gives you coupons to collect a Pokétch, but hidden in the coding, his questions actually draw from a small pool of randomized trivia. This meant not every player got the exact same experience, a rare dynamic detail for handheld titles of the time. Unova added another layer of depth with its subway trainers. The NPCs on the battle subway occasionally reference other regions in their dialogue, such as Johto's radio towers or Hoenn's contests. These were small nods to the interconnectedness of the Pokemon world, suggesting that culture and history extend far beyond the boundaries of one game. In Kalos, Lumiose City hides one of the creepiest NPC encounters in the series. On the second floor of a certain building, a ghostly girl appears behind you, whispers, "No, you're not the one," and disappears. No explanation is ever given, and she never reappears in the story. This hidden moment remains one of the most mysterious events in the entire franchise, sparking countless theories about cut content or supernatural lore. Alola's NPCs also reward close attention. In Malie City's library, some of the books reference Sinnoh myths about the creation of the universe, tying together distant regions through shared stories. These details reinforce the sense of Pokemon having a unified world history, even if each generation focuses on its own local myths. In Galar, the NPCs in Wyndon's Hotel provide hidden references to competitive battling. Some of them use dialogue that mirrors phrases spoken by real-world esports commentators, a subtle nod to the rising popularity of official Pokemon tournaments. It was one of the first times the series directly acknowledged its competitive scene inside the main games. Paldea also carries hidden NPC details. In Mesagoza Academy, students comment differently depending on how far you've progressed in the story. Early on, they talk about being nervous for exams, but later they reference your accomplishments as champion. This evolving dialogue reflects how your reputation shapes the people around you, grounding the narrative in a social context. Lastly, one of the most enduring NPC details across all generations is the recurring Game Freak developer character. Appearing in offices or back rooms, this NPC often jokes about game design or hands you special items after completing milestones like finishing the Pokédex. The hidden meaning here is clear. It's the developers themselves stepping into the world they created, leaving playful nods for the fans who dig the deepest. While each region and spin-off holds its own mysteries, some of the most fascinating hidden details span multiple generations. One of the earliest examples lies in the way Pokemon cries were reused. Many of the original Kanto species share base sound files with small tweaks in pitch or speed. For instance, Rhyhorn and Charizard share the same underlying cry, altered slightly to sound distinct. This resource-saving trick became a hidden connection that players only discovered years later when sound data was analyzed. Another cross-generational detail is the recurring use of fossils. From the Helix and Dome fossils in Kanto to the paired fossils of Galar, each region features prehistoric creatures. What's hidden is how these fossils reflect real paleontological finds from the regions they're based on. For example, Kabuto resembles trilobite fossils found in Japan, while Tyrunt mirrors European discoveries. These subtle ties root the fantasy in real-world science. Pokemon design itself carries secrets across generations. Many creatures introduced in later games are based on unused concepts from the very first design phase. For instance, some Alola forms draw inspiration from scrap designs in the original Pokemon pitch documents. This recycling of ideas means that the DNA of Kanto lives on quietly in every new generation. Another overlooked detail is how NPC references link games together. Trainers in Sinnoh's library speak of myths about a world egg, which echoes creation stories told in Johto's towers. Later, Alola's library repeats these same myths almost word for word, showing a thread of oral tradition passed across the fictional world. These connections are rarely highlighted directly, but they create a sense of shared history that makes the Pokemon universe feel cohesive. The move Struggle is another surprising cross-generational element. While it began as a failsafe in Kanto to prevent players from getting stuck without moves, it appears in every generation with slight changes to its mechanics. The continuity of this move, rarely used in ordinary play, is a hidden reminder of how the series always leaves backup plans within its coding. Another fascinating detail involves the Pokemon Center design. From Kanto through Paldea, the centers evolve graphically, but one thing remains. The healing animation is always accompanied by a musical chime. The notes differ slightly, but the pattern has remained consistent enough that fans recognize it instantly. This hidden musical continuity has become one of the most comforting rituals in gaming. In terms of items, the Master Ball holds its own cross-generational legacy. Beyond always being included in each region's story, its in-game sprite changes subtly over the years. In earlier games, the M was large and centered, while in later titles, it shrank to fit sleeker designs. These tiny graphical evolutions were never announced, but they reflect how even iconic items adapt quietly over time. Cross-generational continuity also extends to rivals. While most regions introduce new characters, a few, like Blue and Red, reappear in later games as older, more experienced trainers. These cameos are hidden rewards for longtime players, reminding them that their past adventures still echo in new generations. The aging of these characters is one of the few visible acknowledgments of time in the Pokemon world. Another subtle but powerful hidden detail is the theme of duality. Every generation introduces a pair of legendary Pokemon representing opposing forces: time and space, land and sea, truth and ideals. This pattern runs so consistently that even when it is disguised, such as in Kalos with Xerneas and Yveltal, the duality theme persists, one that fans sense even if they don't consciously name it. Finally, the overarching hidden detail that spans all generations is how Pokemon itself reflects the dreams of its creator, Satoshi Tajiri. His childhood passion for collecting insects inspired the franchise, and across every generation, there are nods to this origin. Bug-catching contests, nets and trainer sprites, and forests alive with life. The quiet persistence of this theme across decades is the most personal hidden detail of all. The DNA of Pokemon has always been about a child's love for nature, preserved and reimagined for millions of players.